All right, so buckle up because today we are diving deep into the Alec Murdoch case.
Oh yeah, this one is
It's a wild one.
it's a doozy.
I've got this article here. It's called Inside the Alec Murdoch Case, a deep dive into the trial of the century. And
Catchy title.
yeah, right. Prominent family, murders, financial scandals, we've got it all.
It's true crime in real time,
Oh, yeah.
People were glued to this thing as it unfolded.
Totally. And it really does feel like one of those stories that just grabs you and won't let go.
Well, and what's really interesting is how it goes beyond just your average murder mystery.
Yeah.
It gives you this glimpse into power and privilege, this family that seemed perfect, and then boom, everything falls apart.
Yeah, okay, so for anyone who maybe hasn't been following every detail, let's just start with the basics.
Okay.
So we've got Alec Murdoch, big-time lawyer in South Carolina, comes from this whole legal dynasty
Well,
family.
yes, the dynasty, that's key. For like generations, the Murdaughs, they had this influence in their region that was pretty much untouchable.
Like their law firm, their connections, it all created this aura around them?
Almost like they were above the law.
Exactly. And that makes what happened on June 7th, 2021, all the more shocking.
Okay, so what happened?
So Alec calls 911, reports that he found his wife, Maggie, and his son, Paul, shot and killed.
Oh my gosh, where?
At their family estate, Moselle.
Wow, so this is a big property.
Oh, yeah, like a huge estate. And the scene, they say it was just brutal.
And this is where things get a little strange, right? Because the details, they don't quite add up like a typical murder.
Right from the beginning, things just felt off.
So tell me about it. What makes it so strange?
Well, for starters, Paul was killed with a shotgun, but Maggie was killed with an AR-style rifle.
Two different weapons.
Two different weapons, exactly. So either you've got two shooters or one very calculated killer trying to throw people off.
Ooh, that's interesting. So they're already thinking this is not a random act.
No, not at all. And then there's Alec's reaction. Right away, he starts suggesting that this could be revenge.
Revenge for what?
He brings up this boat crash that Paul was involved in back in 2019.
Ah, the boat crash. Yeah, that's where this story takes a major turn.
Huge turn. It wasn't just some little accident. A young woman, Mallory Beach, she died.
Oh, wow. And Paul was driving the boat.
Yeah, and allegedly drunk at the time.
Oh, boy. That complicates things, legally speaking.
Big time. And that's when you start to see these cracks in the Murdoch family's perfect image.
Yeah, I bet. It's like suddenly everyone's looking at them differently.
Right. People start talking about a cover-up, saying their influence is being used to protect Paul from serious consequences.
So it's not just a tragedy. It's this question of, are they above the law?
Exactly. The boat crash put the whole Murdoch family under this intense scrutiny, and it just set the stage for everything that came after.
So this is before the murders even happened.
This is all before the murders even happened, so you've got this dark cloud already hanging over them.
Okay, so this is fascinating, but then it gets even more complex.
Oh, it does. It gets a lot more complex because then we start learning more about Alec himself.
Like, what's going on with him?
Well, this is where things get really interesting.
Okay, you've got me hooked. I got it.
Okay, so Alec comes out and admits to this long-standing opioid addiction, and on top of that, he confesses to stealing millions of dollars.
Wait, what? Millions of dollars from who?
From his own law firm and clients.
Oh my God. Talk about a bombshell.
Right. I mean, this is a respected lawyer, a pillar of the community, and he turns out to be an addict and a thief.
Wow. Okay, so this changes everything.
Absolutely, because now there's a possible motive for the murders.
Okay, so you're thinking, did he kill his wife and son to keep them quiet?
Or to stop them from exposing him. I mean, suddenly, this grieving husband and father becomes the prime suspect.
This is getting good. We got to take a break. But when we come back, we are diving deeper into those theories.
Oh, yeah, we're just getting started.
Stay tuned.
This is gonna get good.
Okay, so we left off with Alec admitting to the opioid addiction and the embezzlement.
Yeah, and it just makes that boat crash even more significant, like it really set the stage for this whole downfall.
Absolutely. You can't underestimate the impact of Mallory Beach's death on this whole story.
It's just tragic all around. A young woman loses her life, and then you have Paul, underage, allegedly drunk, and coming from this powerful family.
Yeah. Talk about a recipe for outrage, and then you add in those allegations of a cover-up.
Right. It really makes you question whether the Murdaughs thought they were untouchable.
And legally, it throws a whole other wrench into things. Paul was facing serious charges, possibly even involuntary manslaughter.
Oh, yeah. Those are not light charges, and the prosecution would have had to prove negligence, that he wasn't being careful driving the boat.
Right. So the stakes were already incredibly high for Paul, and for the whole Murdoch family.
And the public was watching every move they made.
Like they were under a microscope.
Totally. It was like that whole idea of affluenza was playing out in real time, you know?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. People were definitely questioning whether money and power would shield them from consequences.
And you can only imagine how the Beach family must have felt seeing all of that unfold.
Seeking justice for their daughter while it seems like the Murdochs are pulling strings.
Right. It's like this whole other layer of tragedy on top of everything else.
Absolutely. And then remember, this is all before the murders even happened.
Right. So you have this backdrop of suspicion, these unanswered questions about the boat crash, and then bam, the murders happen.
It's like, what's really going on here? What are they hiding?
Exactly. And then you add in Alec's financial crimes and his confession, and it's like, okay, are these things connected?
Did he kill Maggie and Paul to protect himself? To protect Paul, or maybe both?
And that's when investigators start looking for that smoking gun, that one piece of evidence that ties everything together.
And they find it, right? With that video Paul recorded on his phone.
Oh, yeah, right before he was killed.
Chilling, right. And Alec's voice is in the background.
Which means he was at the crime scene when the murders happened.
Completely contradicting his alibi.
Totally blows his whole story out of the water, right? He claimed he wasn't anywhere near the kennels.
And legally, that's huge.
Right.
It's no longer just speculation. It's concrete evidence placing him at the scene of the crime.
I can't imagine what his defense team was thinking when that video came out.
Talk about a scramble, right?
Yeah.
Their whole strategy had to change.
But then just when you think it can't get any crazier, we have that whole staged shooting incident a few months later.
Okay, now that's where things get really wild.
I know. It's like, what was he thinking?
So just to recap, he claims he was shot in the head while changing a tire, like some kind of assassination attempt.
Right, in the middle of nowhere.
The whole thing sounds completely made up.
And of course it was. He eventually admits he set the whole thing up with his cousin.
Trying to get insurance money for Buster, his surviving son.
It's like something out of a movie, right? A desperate attempt to gain sympathy that just backfires spectacularly.
Oh, yeah. Instead of sympathy, it just makes him look even more suspicious and manipulative.
Like, at this point, how can anyone believe anything he says?
Right. It really cemented this image of him as someone who's used to getting away with things.
Someone who thinks he's above the law, just like everyone suspected after the boat crash.
And remember, all of this is happening under the intense glare of the media.
The Alec Murdoch trial was a national obsession. Everyone was talking about it.
The trial of the century, they called it.
It really was. And you had these two totally opposing theories emerging.
On one hand, you have the prosecution saying that Alec was driven by greed and desperation.
That he killed his wife and son to hide his crimes and protect his reputation.
And on the other hand, the defense is saying, hold on, where's the concrete evidence?
Right. They were pointing to the lack of DNA, fingerprints, things like that.
They were basically saying, look, there could be another explanation. Maybe someone else had a motive to harm the Murdochs.
Maybe someone connected to the boat crash or to Alec's legal work, right?
Exactly. They were trying to raise that seed of doubt in the jury's mind.
And that's the whole point of our legal system, right? It's designed to protect the accused, to make sure there's enough evidence for a conviction.
Innocent until proven guilty, right?
Exactly. And in a case like this, where the emotions are so high, the stakes are so high, it's crucial to remember that.
The prosecution has to convince the jury beyond a reasonable doubt.
And that's a tough standard to meet.
It is, but in this case.
Well, in this case, the jury ultimately reached a verdict. The jury found Alec Murdoch guilty.
Guilty on all counts. Yeah, it was a huge moment.
I bet. I mean, this guy, he had it all, right? Wealth, status, a powerful family name.
And it all came crashing down. It's kind of a Shakespearean tragedy, you know?
Totally. And you could really feel that the public was invested in this case. People were talking about it everywhere.
Oh, yeah. Social media was blowing up. Everyone had an opinion.
And it was so divided, right? Like, some people absolutely believed Alec was innocent.
They pointed to the lack of a clear motive, the fact that some of the physical evidence wasn't so straightforward.
Well, others were convinced he was a master manipulator, capable of anything to protect himself.
And it's interesting how those perceptions often aligned with people's existing beliefs, you know?
Totally. Like, if you already distrusted wealthy, powerful people, you were probably more likely to see Alec as guilty.
Right. He became this symbol of corruption and privilege for some.
While others, maybe those who valued family and tradition, held on to that image of him as a grieving husband and father.
It's like this case held up a mirror to society, showing us how divided we are on these issues of class and power.
And accountability, too, right? Like, how do we hold people accountable, especially those who seem untouchable?
Huge questions, and it sparks all these conversations about the justice system, about whether everyone is really treated equally under the law.
Which is why, even though the trial is over, I think the Alec Murdoch case is going to stick with us for a while.
Oh, absolutely. It's a story that will be analyzed and debated for years to come.
Because it's about so much more than just one man's crimes, right?
Right. It's about a system that maybe allowed him to operate unchecked for too long.
It's about a culture that sometimes prioritizes wealth and status above everything else.
And it's about those age-old questions of human nature. Good versus evil. Deceit versus redemption.
I know we've covered a lot, but I still have so many questions swirling in my head.
Yeah, me too. It's one of those cases that stays with you.
Like, what was really going through Alec's mind? Was it just about money, or was there something darker at play?
And we can't forget about the victims in all of this. Maggie, Paul, and Mallory Beach.
Their stories are so important to remember.
Their lives were tragically cut short, and their families are left to pick up the pieces.
It's a reminder that actions have consequences, and those consequences can ripple outward, affecting so many lives.
And even when justice is served, the healing process is long and complicated. So as we wrap up our deep dive into the Alec Murdoch case, I think what sticks with me the most is that truth matters.
Truth matters. Accountability matters.
And even when it seems like power and influence might prevail, justice can and does win sometimes.
And maybe, just maybe, we can learn from these dark stories. We can use them to push for a better, more just world.
That's the hope, right?
Yeah.
That even in the face of tragedy, we can find a way to move forward, to learn and to grow.
Thanks for joining me on this deep dive. It's been a heavy one, but I think an important one.
Absolutely. These conversations are crucial, and I appreciate you having me.
And to everyone listening, thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next time for another deep dive.